Alright guys, welcome back to my channel. So for any of you who are subscribed because of the media videos I do, or if you've just found my media videos and you're watching some more of them, then I've finally decided to do another one. It's not exactly a media studies video, it's more of just a sort of cinematography filmmaking video. But I've decided to do one about easy ways to make your films more professional and cinematic looking. So this is really aimed at people who are just starting out filmmaking, because I'm going to go over some of the main issues that I had when I first started filmmaking, and sort of the common things that are bad that you can easily address about your filming. Now I'm not an absolute professional when it comes to filmmaking, so this really isn't aimed for professional people who are looking to make really cinematic, stuff which is going to blow you away. It's just simple stuff to raise the standard of your production. Now, when I first started making films, the main issues and the common issues that I've seen amongst others are out of focus shots, badly lit shots, shaky shots, badly edited sound, and too many fades. Now, the first thing I'm going to address is focus. Now, if you're using a DSLR and you've set up your shot, you might look at it through the screen and think, yeah, that looks fine, everything looks clear. But once you actually zoom in, you might start to see that the shot is actually out of focus. So the easy trick for doing this is zooming in. Don't set up a shot and just focus it from a wide view. Zoom it in, focus on a specific object, and make sure you get the depth of field that you want in that shot. So that is a simple trick that I use to make sure that my shots are in focus. So the next one is rule of thirds, and if you haven't seen the 9 square grid that you sometimes get on viewfinders, then that's what I'm referring to by the rule of thirds. Now I've got myself positioned here, not in the absolute, best composition, but I am slightly right to the shot. And there's a space here which I've filled with stuff which describes me in the background. Like, I've got a guitar which represents me love for music, I've got a clapperboard which represents my love of film, and I've got a globe which represents me love for travelling and geography. So the idea is that you set up your shots and it basically looks more cinematic than just being dead on. Like, if you're just filming someone walking dead on or sitting dead on, it's a little bit plain and boring, and generally someone's sort of attention point of focus will be in these sort of 4 areas of the screen rather than like straight dead on. So that is another easy way for making your films look more professional and cinematic. But the key thing that you need to remember with the rule of thirds is that unless you're doing this deliberately for a specific reason, you need to make sure that where the person is looking is into the dead area of the shot and not out of the shot, because that gives it a very sort of discomforting feel, and you've got an absolute shit ton of dead space that is not being used whatsoever unless you fill it with something and give it meaning. The next thing that I'm going to address is shaky shots. Now, the easiest way to get rid of shakiness is obviously just by sticking the camera on a tripod and getting a locked off shot. But these are pretty plain and not very professional or cinematic looking, generally speaking. So, in order to get more cinematic moving shots without shakiness, stuff like Steadicams, sliders, gimbals and all that sort of stuff are the way to go. Now, Steadicam or slider might sound like an expensive piece of equipment, and you'd be right, they are. In terms of industry standard Steadicams and sliders, they are very expensive to buy, and they're very valued pieces of equipment. But if you've got a DSLR like me, you can actually purchase a basic form of Steadicams and sliders very inexpensively. The Steadicam that I've got cost about £25, and it was the same for the slider that I bought as well. Now, if you don't know what a Steadicam is, it's basically a device which separates the camera from the camera operator and takes out any bumpiness that you're going to pick up from your movement, basically. So how it works is the camera sits on a post, and then there's like a gimbal which links the post to your body. On my version, it's a very basic version, so you literally just hold it with your hand, but it works in the same way, and you can get some incredibly smooth shots with it, because it literally is like the camera is sort of floating and flying about. Downside with it is very hard to master and use, and generally if you are an amateur with filmmaking, you're probably going to find it hard, and your shots are going to be very sort of unsteady and they'll tip from side to side and that sort of thing. But sliders are easier to use. Sliders is basically like a mini dolly to put your camera onto. So you literally just put the camera on and then slide it along some metal rails, and you can get some really nice simple shots with it. Now the next topic that I'm going to go on to is lighting. Now if you are an amateur at filmmaking, it would probably be best to set your DSLR, or if you've got a camcorder, it would be on automatic anyway, usually. But it would be best to set your DSLR onto manual, unless you do have in-depth knowledge about aperture, shutter speed and ISO, and you can use them as tools. Now, that's my advice for outdoors. Generally, the lighting for outdoors isn't too bad. One of the things I would try and do is shoot in golden hour, because you can get some really, really nice shots. Golden hour, if you don't know, refers to basically the sunset, or that hour just before the sun goes down, and you can really get some nice shots, just simple nice shots without even having to try, just by shooting golden hour. But in terms of indoors, my advice for getting nice lighting indoors is actually not by turning on all the lights in whatever building you're filming in, but actually trying to get natural light sources as opposed to artificial lighting from the room. I find a lot of LED lights, like especially the ones in my room, they just give it a very sort of comfortable, boring, unprofessional sort of look. Now, if you look at these shots that I've took in my living room, this first shot is just by using light that's coming in from the window, and then this shot is with the main living room light on. Now, there's not that much of a difference, but there is quite a sort of tungsten glow from the light, from the main light in the living room, and it doesn't quite look very professional. It just looks more TV or sitcom-ish. If you're trying to shoot an action or a horror movie, you're really going to want to use natural lighting as opposed to, you know, just fill sort of lights that you would find in a room. Just after I filmed that clip, I actually went into the hallway, and if you take a look at this shot, it is really, really interesting because you've actually got the light source coming from the window at the top of the stairs, and it's hitting that wall, and it's giving it a really, really nice look. But if I then go and turn on the light for the hallway and take a look at it now, it just doesn't look as good. So sometimes it is better to use less lighting than loads of lighting, as long as what you're trying to expose is clearly, you know, picked out. Because often when you have got very well lit lighting, things are going to be distracting. Like, obviously, everything in the background is pretty much distracting for when you're watching this now. Another thing with lighting is if natural lighting or the room lights aren't good enough and you actually want to get some proper lights in, you can actually kind of mostly avoid doing that sort of stuff, because professional cinematic lights are generally quite expensive from what I've found. So what I do for my videos is I've actually got a torch right here, just pointing basically towards my face. It's not particularly bright, so it's not blinding us, and it's picking me out a little bit from the background, because if I turn that off, it's it's much better with the torch there, because it just picks and distinguishes me out a bit more. So using stuff like torches is another good thing for lighting. Another way you can get a really nice cinematic shot is actually by picking something which has a large depth to it, and coming out from a corner and sort of focusing from the corner right to the very end of, say, a corridor. If you look at this shot, basically I've focused it from the beam of the doorway to the door that's leading into the garden, and it it's a very simple technique just by focus pulling, but it gives it a really nice cinematic look. But with every shot that you film, you've also got to bear props in mind. Now imagine that there's a person in the garden that I'm wanting to focus the audience's attention on. The yellow washing basket and the orange Sainsbury's bag are very distracting. So if I tidy the shot up a bit, it becomes less distracting, giving it an overall more cinematic feel. Now, the final thing that I haven't addressed yet is editing. Now, editing is a bit of a tricky one because, you know, similar to cinematography, everyone has their own style and everyone is trying to get across a different point and a different feeling. But generally what I found is in my previous work when I first started editing and with a lot of sort of student work, there is a hell of a lot of fades. Fades are really overused. Now, one of the reasons why you might use a fade is because you think that the cut is going to be too harsh. But this could actually be down to the sound and not the image or visuals. So if we take a look at this, in my previous video I basically did a random sort of cinematic channel update thing, which I don't really think it did very well. But in terms of the way I shot it, it flowed quite well. So it's been a couple of weeks since the whole YouTube partner program dropped. Must get a bit boring. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe I am the boring one. I think I'm boring. Do you think I'm boring? Well, I mean, I'm not the most entertaining character. No, you're not. My voice and my actions and all that are just a bit plain. Yeah. What I've basically done is I haven't used fades to fade each shot into one another. What I've done is I've bridged the sound, fading it in and out, and I've actually moved the sound so it actually comes before the clip starts. So you already get the sense of the atmosphere of the room fading in before the clip actually starts. So it's not as jarring and you don't get that jump, as opposed to if I removed all these bridges of sound and the fading and I just left it with one simple cut. Must get a bit boring. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe I am the boring one. I think I'm boring. Do you think I'm boring? Obviously it's not too noticeable, but I hope you can tell that obviously there is a major difference between how well the first one flows and how sort of jarring that one can be to just go from one room to another with no sort of bridging sound. I think. But if you still think that that is not the best, just cutting from one shot to another trick that you can do that I know a lot of YouTubers do is actually by having a sudden disruption in the shot. So either panning dramatically to the left or zooming out. Like if you take a look at this shot, which was one of the shots that I took a while ago and I edited it together with the shot after it, and I actually zoomed out on that shot, and the movement of it distracts you and takes your attention away from the actual cut. That's basically the magic behind it. So if you take a look at this, for example, I've panned the camera dramatically, and as I do that I've cut it to the next shot, and I've also done the same thing to introduce that shot, and it takes away from the actual cut because you're not looking at a plain, solid composition. So that's another good unique transition. Now the next thing is color grading. This can also really help give your film a cinematic feel. Often with a lot of editing softwares you can actually have preset sort of cinematic sort of color grades and tones that you can add to your videos, and it'll straight away put a more cinematic tone on. But obviously it is better to manually do this yourself. Now if I'm shooting an action or a horror sequence, I'd usually decrease the saturation a bit, aka make it less colourful, and I'd alter the white balance, giving it more of a blue sort of purple-ish, colder tint. I know I said that editing was the last thing, but one other thing I haven't really talked that much about is sound. Now, often with a lot of amateur films, and when you start out filmmaking, wind noise is a massive problem. Now, if you've got a DSLR, you can buy Rode mics for pretty cheap, sort of around, 40-50 quid, and they come with wind jammers or dead cats. 1 minute, I'll get my one, which is basically gonna stop the wind from getting to the mic and giving you that muffly sound effect. But also, in the editing process, sound is also overlooked, and adding certain sounds in and building background sounds up can actually really add to the visuals and make the visuals seem more professional and cinematic. For example, if you filmed a shot of someone in the city, but you haven't quite got the noises of the city in the background, like say your shot's a bit quiet, add some stuff in the background, find some, sound effects of like a distant siren or a distant motorway, and add that in, because it's going to build up the environment and the atmosphere for when people are watching it. And obviously sound effects are a big thing as well. Try not to use cheap sound effects. If you go on YouTube and watch the first video and think, yeah, that'll do, if it's a gunshot or something, try and go through and search for some better quality sound effects, because often some of the ones on YouTube are a bit poor, to be honest. So yeah, if you are an amateur filmmaker and you've, grasped the basics of editing and camera and all this sort of stuff, I hope this really has helped, because these were the things that I've improved on over the years, and I look back at older stuff and I thought to myself, well, that was actually really simple, I could have fixed that easily to make my shot look more cinematic or professional, but I didn't. So I hope this has helped you, and if you're a media student, I hope this will help your project for, your media studies grade. If you can't get hold of a DSLR, a lot of these things can still be done with camcorders. I think my camcorder will fit onto my slider and my Steadicam, although Steadicams you've got to balance them, and I'm not sure whether the weight would be appropriate for it. And a lot of these things could even be done filmed with phones. When it comes to the editing and setting up the shot, like lighting and props, a lot of the cinematography actually isn't through the camera itself. But yeah, if you are an amateur filmmaker, try and get yourself a DSLR and a nice editing software, and stuff like Steadicams and sliders. They honestly might sound expensive, but they're really not. You can get them really cheap. So yeah, that was a basic sort of idea and explanation of how to simply make your films more cinematic and professional. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope it's been useful. If you have, don't forget to leave a like and comment and share it. And yeah, I'm going to end this here. I might maybe do another media sort of filmmaking tutorial in the future, who knows. If you do want to see that, let us know. But thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.